I think, reasonably attractive news from Pakistan and India. They've been going at it, and we've been involved in trying to have them stop. And we have some reasonably decent news. I think hopefully that's going to be coming to an end. It's been going on for a long time, decades and decades. There's a lot of dislike, unfortunately. So we've been in the middle trying to help them both out, see if we can get some organization and some peace. And I think probably that's going to be happening. We have Venezuela, as you know, has been very much in the news, and we're sending supplies. Supplies are getting through a little bit more. It's not easy. It's hard to believe somebody would say, let's not do it. What difference would that make, except it's great for his people to let it get through? But we're sending a lot of supplies down to Venezuela. People are starving to death. And you would really think that the man in charge currently would let those supplies get through. We are getting them into some of the cities and some of the areas that need them the most, and it's not an easy job. It's very difficult, actually. On North Korea, we just left Chairman Kim. We had a really, I think, a very productive time. We thought, and I thought, and Secretary Pompeo felt that it wasn't a good thing to be signing anything. I'm going to let Mike speak about it. But we literally just left. We spent pretty much all day with Kim Jong-un, who is, he's quite a guy and quite a character, and I think our relationship is very strong. But at this time, we had some options, and at this time we decided not to do any of the options, and we'll see where that goes. But it was a very interesting 2 days, and I think actually it was a very productive 2 days, but sometimes you have to walk. And this was just one of those times, and I'll let Mike speak to that for a couple of minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had been working, our teams, the team that I brought to bear, as well as the North Koreans, for weeks to try and develop a path forward. So at the summit, we could make a big step along the way towards what the two leaders had agreed to back in Singapore in June of last year. We made real progress, and indeed we made even more progress when the two leaders met over the last 36 hours. Unfortunately, we didn't get all the way. We didn't get to something that ultimately made sense for the United States of America. I think Chairman Kim was hopeful that we would. We asked him to do more. He was unprepared to do that, but I'm still optimistic. I'm hopeful that the teams will get back together in the days and weeks ahead and continue to work out. It's a very complex problem. We have said since the beginning that this would take time. Our teams have gotten to know each other better. We know what the limits are. We know where some of the challenges are. And I think as we continue to work on this in the days and weeks ahead, we can make progress so that we can ultimately achieve what it is that the world wants, which is to denuclearize North Korea, to reduce risk for the American people and the people all around the world. I wish we could have gotten a little bit further. But I'm very optimistic that the progress that we made, both in the run-up to this summit, as well as the progress that the two leaders made over these past 2 days, put us in position to get a really good outcome. And the President and Chairman Kim both felt good that they had made that progress, but couldn't quite get along the line any further to make a deal that would have been bigger at this point. I hope we'll do so in the weeks ahead. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. All right, Major, please.
Process being more difficult? Sorry, Mr. President. Has this process been more difficult than you thought? And was the North Korean demand for lifting of some sanctions the real sticking point here, in that you did not want to do that and they did? And will there
it was about the sanctions.
Will there be a third summit, Mr. President?
Basically, they wanted the sanctions lifted in their entirety, and we couldn't do that. They were willing to denuke a large portion of the areas that we wanted, but we couldn't give up all of the sanctions for that. So we continue to work, and we'll see, but we had to walk away from that particular suggestion. We had to walk away from that.
Will all the sanctions that are currently in existence remain, sir?
They're in place. You know, I was watching, as a lot of you folks over the weeks have said, we've given up. We haven't given up anything, and frankly, I think we'll end up being very good friends with Chairman Kim and with North Korea, and I think they have tremendous potential. I've been telling everybody they have tremendous potential, unbelievable potential, but we're going to see. But it was about sanctions. I mean, they wanted sanctions lifted, but they weren't willing to do an area that we wanted. They were willing to give us areas, but not the ones we wanted. John?
As we know, I mean, there's an incredibly complex set of issues that are at play here in terms of lifting the sanctions and what denuclearization is.
Right.
Did you get any distance toward sort of what Kim's vision of denuclearization is?
Did.
Because there is a lot of a line of thinking that he wants to keep some nukes.
Yeah.
I mean, would you allow him to do that? And if you
well,
can't,
I don't, John. I don't want to comment. Excuse me. I don't want to comment on that exactly. But he has a certain vision, and it's not exactly our vision, but it's a lot closer than it was a year ago. And I think, you know, eventually we'll get there. But for this particular visit, we decided that we had to walk, and we'll see what happens. Okay. No, look, we have a gentleman nobody's ever heard of that was Sean Hannity. What are you doing here, Sean Hannity? Should we let him do a question? I don't know. Yeah, John, go ahead.
Follow up with you. Yeah. So if he wants the sanctions completely off and you want more on denuclearization, how can you bridge that gap between now and the next time you might sit down together?
With time, it'll be bridged, I think, at a certain point. But there is a gap. We have to have sanctions, and he wants to denuke, but he wants to just do areas that are less important than the areas that we want. We know the country very well, believe it or not. We know every inch of that country, and we have to get what we have to get, because that's a big give. Yes, Sean, please.
I work in radio and TV. The mic's on. Mr. President, thank you. Mr. Secretary, good to see you. Mr. President, if you could elaborate a little bit more. We have some history. President Reagan walked away in Reykjavik. A lot of condemnation at the time, and it ended up working out very well in the end for the United States. Was this mostly your decision, what message would you want to send Chairman Kim as he's listening to this press conference about the future and your relationship?
Well, Sean, I don't want to say it was my decision, because what purpose is that? I want to keep the relationship, and we will keep the relationship. We'll see what happens over the next period of time. But as you know, we got our hostages back. There's no more testing. And one of the things, importantly, that Chairman Kim promised me last night is, regardless, he's not going to do testing of rockets and nuclear. Not going to do testing. So, you know, I trust him, and I take him at his word. I hope that's true. But in the meantime, we'll be talking. Mike will be speaking with his people. He's also developed a very good relationship with the people, really the people representing North Korea. I haven't spoken to Prime Minister Abe yet. I haven't spoken to President Moon, South Korea. But we will, and we'll tell them it's a process and it's moving along, but we just felt it wasn't appropriate to sign an agreement today. We could have. I just felt it wasn't very appropriate. Yeah, Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. President. Two questions, if I may. First, did you learn anything new about Chairman Kim through this meeting? And secondly, of course, while this was going on, the drama back in Washington, your former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who worked for you for 10 years, his office right next to yours, right by yours at Trump Tower.
Having a fake hearing like that and having it in the middle of this very important summit is really a terrible thing. They could have made it 2 days later or next week, and it would have been even better. They would have had more time. But having it during this very important summit is sort of incredible. And he lied a lot, but it was very interesting because he didn't lie about one thing. He said no collusion with the Russian hoax. And I said, I wonder why he didn't just lie about that too, like he did about everything else. I mean, he lied about so many different things, and I was actually impressed that he didn't say, well, I think there was collusion for this reason or that. He didn't say that. He said no collusion, and I was a little impressed by that, frankly. He could have gone all out. He only went about 95% instead of 100%. But the fact is there is no collusion, and I call it the witch hunt. This should never happen to another president. This is so bad for our country. So bad. You look at this whole hoax. I call it the Russian witch hunt. I now add the word hoax. It's a very, very bad thing for our country. But I was impressed with the fact that he, because the most important question up there was the one on collusion, and he said he saw no collusion. So we'll see what happens. But it was pretty shameful, I think. Yes, ma'am. Please.
President Trump. President Trump.
Go ahead. How about one of you instead of three?
Well, actually, I do have the microphone, I guess, so...
Excuse me. Person in the front. Go ahead. No. Not you. Excuse me. Yeah, we'll get to you. Thank you.
Thank you, President Trump. Jane Tan with CNN News and Guangdong Television. What was the atmosphere like when you walk away from the negotiation table?
I think it was very good, very friendly. This wasn't a walk away like you get up and walk out. No, this was very friendly. We shook hands. There's a warmth that we have. Now, I hope that stays. I think it will. But we're positioned to do something very special. This has been going on for many decades. This isn't me. This should have been solved during many presidential runs, and people talked about it. They never did anything. I get a kick out of so many people from past administrations telling me how to negotiate when they were there. In some cases, for 8 years, they did nothing. But I think the relationship was very warm, and when we walked away, it was a very friendly walk. Mike, you might want to speak to that for a second.
No, I agree. I talked with my counterparts as well. Look, we hope we do more, but everyone's very focused on how we continue to build on this. We are certainly closer today than we were 36 hours ago, and we were closer then than we were a month or two before that. So real progress was made. I think everyone had hoped we could do it just a little bit better, but the departure was with an agreement that we would continue to work on what has been an incredibly difficult problem. Both sides are resolved to achieve it, and everyone walked away in that spirit.
And may I add, you and Chairman Kim are from very different political systems. You are from different generations. And what do you find? It's a very
different system. I would say that's true.
How do you find you guys in common? Because we saw the atmosphere.
We just like each other. I mean, we have a good relationship. It's a totally different system, to put it mildly, but we like each other. Good relationship. Go ahead in the back. Go ahead.
Mr. President, do you think it was premature to have held the summit when all these things had not been tied down? I mean, in the White House schedule last night, it said signing agreement today. And I wonder whether, as a follow-up question, whether you could just sketch out what the next few months look like. Thank you.
You always have to be prepared to walk. I could have signed an agreement today, and then you people would have said, oh, what a terrible deal, what a terrible thing he did. No, you have to be prepared to walk. And, there was a potential we could have signed something today. I could have 100% signed something today. We actually had papers ready to be signed, but it just wasn't appropriate. I want to do it right. I'd much rather do it right than do it fast. Yes, please, go ahead. Go ahead. Go, first, go, yeah. You have to speak up.
Yes, and, yes. I'm a reporter from South Korea, and I appreciate your effort to advance denuclearization in Korean Peninsula. And could you elaborate on the options and the various ways that you discussed with Chairman Kim to advance denuclearization? Could you specify?
We discussed many ways, and the denuclearization is a very important word, become a very well-used word. And a lot of people don't know what it means, but to me it's pretty obvious. We have to get rid of the nukes. I think he's got a chance to have one of the most successful countries rapidly, too, on Earth. Incredible country, incredible location. You're right between, if you think of it, you have on one side Russia and China, and on the other you have South Korea. And you're surrounded by water, and among the most beautiful shorelines in the world. There's tremendous potential in North Korea, and I think he's going to lead it to a very important thing economically. I think it's going to be an absolute economic power. Yes, go ahead, please. Go ahead. Yeah.
President David Sanger from the New York Times.
I know, David.
6 months ago when you spoke, or 8 months ago in Singapore, you said if you didn't have something in 6 months, we should come back and ask you about it. In that time, you have seen Chairman Kim increase the number of missiles he's produced and continue to produce more nuclear material. And that's been a pressure point on you because he's showing that the arsenal is getting larger while this is going on.
Well, some people, David, are saying that, and some people are denying that. They have shots from above, way above, and some people are saying that, and some people aren't. But I could have taken that out today, but I think you and others would have said we didn't get enough for what we'd be giving up. So, and don't forget, we're partners with a lot of countries on this, if you think about it, with the sanctions. We have a whole big partnership with the United Nations and many countries, including Russia, China, and others. And then, of course, South Korea is very important to this whole thing, and Japan. I don't want to do something that is going to violate the trust that we've built up. We have a very strong partnership.
So can you just give us a little more detail? Did you get into the question of actually dismantling the Yongbyon complex?
Yes, absolutely.
And does he seem willing ultimately to take all of that out?
Sure, totally.
He does. He just wants all the sanctions off first.
He would do that, but he wants the sanctions for that. And as you know, there's plenty left after that. And I just felt it wasn't good. Mike and I spent a long time negotiating and talking about it to ourselves. And I felt that particular, as you know, that facility, while very big, it wasn't enough to do what we were doing.
So he was willing to do Yongbyon, but you wanted more than that, I assume?
We had to have more than that, yeah. We had to have more than that.
So
because there are other things that you haven't talked about, that you haven't written about, that we found, and we have to have. That was done a long time ago, but the people didn't know about.
Including the uranium, including the second uranium enrichment plant.
Exactly. And we brought many, many points up that I think they were surprised that we knew. But we had to do more than just the one level, because if we did the one level and we gave up all of that leverage, it's been taking a long time to build.
So he was not willing to take out that second.
David, I want to take off the sanctions so badly because I want that country to grow. That country has got such potential, but they have to give up more. We could have done that deal. Mike, you want to speak to that?
Only, David. There are also timing and sequencing issues that were associated with that as well, which we didn't quite get across the finish line as well. But remember, too, even that facility, even the Yongbyon facility, and all of its scope, which is important for sure, still leaves missiles, still leaves warheads and weapon systems. So there's a lot of other elements that we just couldn't get to.
And the listing of all of them. Which
yes, sir, and a declaration associated. All of those things we couldn't quite get there today.
That's right. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify, when you talk about what you would be willing to give up all of the sanctions for, are you still thinking that you want North Korea to give up everything, to do complete, verifiable
I don't want to say that
before you lift sanctions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't want to say that to you because I don't want to put myself in that position from the standpoint of negotiation. But, we want a lot to be given up. And we're giving up. And we'll have to, we'll be helping them along economically. Us and many other countries are going to be helping. They're going to be in there. They're prepared to help. I can tell you Japan, South Korea, I think China, so many. And speaking of China, we're very well on our way to doing something special. But we'll see. I mean, I am always prepared to walk. I'm never afraid to walk from a deal. And I would do that with China, too, if it didn't work out.
Are you concerned if you're not able to reach an agreement that the testing will start?
And all I can tell you is that's what he said, and we'll see. Yes, go ahead, please. Go ahead, please. In the back. Red, in the red.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you.
Jessica Stone from CGTN. I have a question about China, as you were talking about. You talk about China being willing potentially to help economically and the fact that you've talked or will talk to Presidents Moon and Prime Minister Abe. How would you describe China's role in facilitating the engagement that's happened so far between Pyongyang and Washington?
I think China's been a big help, bigger than most people know. On the border, as you know, 93% of the goods coming into North Korea come through China. So there's a great power there. At the same time, I happen to believe that North Korea is calling its own shots. They're not taking orders from anybody. He's a very strong guy, and they're able to do things that are pretty amazing. But 93% still come in from China. China has an influence, and China's been a big help. And Russia's been a big help, too. As you know, there's a pretty small part of the border, but nevertheless significant, about 28 miles. And things can happen there, too, and they've been a help. Yes, go ahead, please.
Thanks, President. Jen Chen with Shenzhen Media Group of China. In your meeting with Chairman Kim this morning and yesterday, did the topic of China come up? If so, what can you share with us today? And you probably will have the end of Mar-a-Lago summit in March with Chinese President Xi Jinping. What would you like accomplished with your agenda regarding China at that time? Thank you.
We did talk about China today a lot, and he's getting along with China, and so are we. And we are, we're right now, you look at what's happened to our country. We've picked up trillions and trillions of dollars of net worth. Our stock market is almost at its all-time high. Our economy is incredible. Our unemployment numbers are among the best we've ever had in our history. Individual groups like African American, women, you just take a look at any group, Hispanic, you saw that, just came out, the best in history, African American, best in history. So many different numbers are coming out so good. So we have the strongest economy, possibly, that we've ever had. Fiat Chrysler just announced that they're going to spend $4.5 billion right next to Detroit in Michigan. They're building a tremendous plant. It's actually an expansion of another plant.